Once upon a time, there lived an old queen who was obsessed with becoming younger. She searched far and wide. Any remedy would help her gain her youthfulness back. And once, in the secret book, in the hidden library, she found a story about an apple tree that produced apples, the bite of which makes one younger and more youthful and more beautiful. But the queen was old and brittle, and she lived a life where she was used to servants. So it was understandable she did not plan to go and seek the tree herself. Instead, she called one of her youngest servants, the prettiest girl that was in the kingdom. "Come, girl," she said, "there is an apple tree I wish you to find, and bring me apples from it." And she told the girl about the tree. The young girl heard the story and felt deep sadness inside her. "How will I ever find this magical apple tree?" she thought. But she said nothing. She bowed to her queen and just humbly asked, "It seems like a dangerous task, my queen," she said. "May I ask that if I succeed, I may gain my freedom, and at once I can leave the kingdom and my servitude to you and go back to the lands of my parents?" Reluctantly, Queen said yes. She figured that if the girl brings her apples, she could always say no to her. After all, she was the queen and she could change her mind. The servant girl came back to her hut and dropped to the ground in hysterics, her forehead touching the ground, tears dropping into the rich soil. "How will I find this magical apple tree?" she whispered. "Where do I go?" There was nothing in the story or in the books that suggested of the place, of where to go and find it. But her desire for freedom was so sincere, and her longing to see her parents was so deep that she could not stop crying. And her tears became bigger and juicier, and soon turned into streams. "Follow the water," she heard the whisper. She opened her eyes and saw the tears run down the hill, glistening in the moonlight. They showed her the way to the forest, and then to the meadow, and then to the river, and then to the sea. And there on the shore there was a boat waiting for her. She jumped eagerly, and the boat, powered by the winds and the currents, rocking girl from side to side, took her forward. And after nights and days, weeks and months, soon the boat reached another shore. And as the girl stepped out of the boat, she noticed a beautiful young apple tree growing right in the middle of a meadow. The apples in this were golden, shining around, and the leaves were the most beautiful shade of green. She gasped, looking at the tree. She ran towards it and hugged the slim trunk of the tree and kissed it. "Thank you for showing me the way here. Thank you." And so she sat underneath the tree and told the tree her story and why she came. And as she finished, a golden apple fell into her apron. She picked it up eagerly and said her thanks. And at once she jumped into the boat and let the boat carry her back. And shortly after, she arrived back to her land and walked up the river, following the path by its side, and back through the meadow and the forest to her hut, and from there all the way back to the castle, to where the old queen resided. She knocked eagerly on her door and rushed in with a golden apple in her hand. "Here," she said, "my queen, here is your apple." "You try it first," the queen said. But don't bite all of this, just a tiny bit, so I could see the effects." And gently the girl bit a tiny bit of an apple, and immediately her eyes sparkled, her cheeks lit up in rose color, her hair waved and became more golden, and she smiled with the most dazzling smile. The queen rushed towards her, seeing the effect, grabbed an apple and bit into it. And sure enough, she too became younger. Her skin stretched out, her hair lost the gray, and her aching bones became stronger. And as she looked at herself in the mirror, she was overcome with joy. She looked youthful and healthy and radiant. But now as she stood next to the young girl, she became jealous. "I want to be the prettiest in the kingdom," she thought to herself. She called in the girl to her. "Now, I want you to return to the apple tree, and I want you to chop it down and bring it to me as evidence. I do not wish for anyone else to find it, and don't you dare take in a single apple of it. Now go, and if you return, then you may have your freedom." The girl left her side and returned to her hut. She felt deflated and sad. She came to love the tree when she was there. How can she chop it down? But it was the price of her freedom. The girl took an axe and followed the waters all the way to the boat. She jumped into the boat with deep sadness in her heart, and soon she arrived to the magical island where the magical apple tree grew in the meadow. She hugged the tree and started to cry, telling the tree the story that it was the tree's life that was the price for her freedom, and she spent days weeping, not knowing what to do, not willing to pay the price. And one day, as she gathered all her force and took an axe, she suddenly heard a melodic voice. "Please, please don't chop down the tree," the voice said. The girl wiped her tears and with surprise looked around. She hasn't spotted anyone here, and as she gazed into the crown of the tree, she noticed a white dove sitting on one of the branches. "Please," said the dove, "this tree is home to so many of us who find solace and peace in its crown. I really do not want to, but what else am I to do?" said the girl. "I have a solution for you," said the dove. "Not far from here an apple tree has fallen during the last storm. I will paint apples golden, so take that instead." The girl smiled, loving the solution, and nodded in agreement. The dove flipped her wings and headed towards the sun, and soon she came back with a golden dust on her wings. The girl followed the dove all the way to the apple tree. Together they painted the apples, and the girl dragged the tree all the way to the boat. She loaded her in and set off on her way back home. And in no time, the girl was back to the kingdom, back to the castle, and the queen with a young fallen apple tree with golden apples on it. "Here," she said, "here is the tree." With hungry eyes, the queen jumped and started to collect all the apples. "This is surely enough for me to stay youthful forever," she thought. "And now burn the rest," she shouted to her male servants. And they took away the tree as she hung on to the apples. "Now go," she said to the young girl, "but you must leave right this second, or I'll send my dogs after you." Terrified, the young girl ran out of the castle. "How will I run? Faster than the dogs?" she thought. "What am I to do?" She looked around and saw an old donkey standing by the castle wall. She knew the donkey very well, for she often gave it carrots. She came out to the donkey and hugged it and cried into its mane. "This might be the end of me," she said. "Stay well, my dear old friend." And as she was about to set off, she suddenly noticed that the donkey was trying to get something off your pocket. She reached out and pulled out a golden apple, the one that fell from the beautiful tree upon which the dove was sitting. She laughed and gave it to the donkey, and as soon as the donkey ate it, it became strong and youthful, and it jumped up, turning into a beautiful stallion. The girl jumped up on the horse and galloped forward towards the lands of your family. All meanwhile, as the old queen commanded everyone to leave her room, for she wanted to eat the apples without anyone seeing, so she must stay beautiful and youthful forever. And now, with the young girl gone, she surely would be the most beautiful in the kingdom. She grabbed the biggest apple and dug into it, and then another one, and another one. Triumphant, she came up to the mirror and gazed, but to her shock and horror, it was a wrinkly old face that was looking back at her. And as she was gazing into the mirror, touching her skin, her nose prolonged and stretched even more, her eyes became more lucid and duller in color, and her skin drooped. She was aging, second by second, and soon she became so old and crippled that she just fell onto the floor, sitting there, helpless. What the young girl didn't know was that the apple tree that she brought back was the tree that grew the apples that made everyone and everything older. And that's how the old queen got exactly what she deserved. And the young girl received her freedom back, and soon she reached the lands that were truly hers and lived happily ever after, telling stories of the magical apple tree and the wise white dove that calls it home.